I think the best way to look at it is just looking at it in fairness and in reality, but also not being so extreme about one side or the other. I know that's what's the cool thing to do, which is a perfect segue into our next topic that I know everybody wants to talk about, folks. So let's just go ahead and get into it. If you have not been on Twitter or social media, we'll just throw it out there. We'll try to go through this timeline of madness. Arkansas gets the victory over a team like Texas Tech in the Liberty Bowl. Everything's great, grand, wonderful, and fine. Well, then on Twitter, there becomes a viral video or a viral tweet from a player from Texas Tech. And, he was very honest about, what was going on. And he even started the tweet as I pull it up now. But he started the tweet where he's saying, hey, Arkansas is a great team, blah, blah, blah. He says, in fact, here it is. Okay, CJ Hounds is Bakersville. But he says, there's no denying that Arkansas played a great game, and I'm not taking that away from them. But number 55, Fernando Carmona, blatantly stepping on my ankle and pressing down on it on purpose, is straight up dirty, proceeds to say, I got your bleep bleep, do better Razorback football. And for those of you who are wanting to know the type of the video or release that he posted, it's this one right over here where you see Carmona kind of step on his ankle a little bit. And we'll do a little replay action there for you to look at it. But just kind of steps on his ankle. That's what happened. And that's what people are talking about today. So, guys, we'll start with this part of it. When we saw this video, your immediate reaction to what transpired?
I mean, listen, we know Carmona, like, good kid. I shouldn't call him a kid. Good guy. Dirty play, and he's, now that the apology has come out, I mean, he's kind of admitted to as much. So I get it for people who want to look at, the full play and, he didn't, I mean, he wouldn't have apologized in the manner he did if he didn't feel like he did something wrong. So that's just kind of how I feel about it. And for me, it's like, I'm over it, like, it happened. You got caught. I understand other people do it. I understand things happen in a football game. Two wrongs don't make a right. He apologized. Like, I don't know what else he was supposed to do from that standpoint, but I am very much over the outrage on both sides of this thing. I really am.
This happens to me a lot where, like, I see something and I kind of have my reaction. Like you said, John, like, what was your reaction? Mine was, yeah, that's not good. He should not have done that. That's bad. That is a dirty play. Was I like clutching my pearls? Was I like stunned that a football player did a mean thing to another football player? Like, no, like that kind of stuff. I'm sure it literally happens every single game. Those pileups are always a little bit weird. But I saw it and I was like, oh, that's not a great look. I don't like that. And I kind of just went on with my day. Mm-hmm. I came back later to the internet to see the full outrage and all that. And I realized that we've lost the ability in society to just take something for what it is. Again, we say that all the time when we're talking about this football team, but sometimes you can just look at something and say, that's bad. That shouldn't have happened, and again, he apologized. I think we should leave it there. I don't think it has to be this whole, should he be kicked off the team? Should he have his scholarship taken? Should he serve jail time? People literally were talking about criminal charges. I understand they're random people on the internet, but they were doing that. And then I also saw some Hawk fans being like, well, actually, he was justified for doing that. Actually, it wasn't that bad. It's like, that's not right either. You don't really need to do either one of those things. Sometimes you can just look at something and say, that's bad. Don't want that to happen. The guy apologizes, says he's not going to do it again. Okay, let's leave it at that. That's kind of where I'm at on it.
Acknowledging that something was wrong or a bad look does not make you less of a Razorback fan.
Yes.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
And the pearl clutching and virtue signaling and morality police on the other side, like, come on now.
Yeah.
It's just, that's what you get on social media, man, is the extremes.
Here's the deal. It's like, I know that football is nowadays, especially because everything's on TV and you have it in 4K in some cases, and it's an HD and you get replays, there's cameras everywhere. There's a lot more going on. And to be honest, it's one of those deals to where if it happened where the field was flipped, we may not have even known this or ever seen it because of the angle of the camera. Like, there's just so many things that had to happen for this to come out. And it's not good. It's not. And that's where I was the same way with you guys, where I was just kind of like, hey, that sucks. That should never happen. That's a bad look. But then he comes out and apologizes. In fact, this was his tweet that he put out there. He said, "I'd like to apologize for my actions last Friday night in the Liberty Bowl. I let my emotions get away from me. I have nothing but respect for Texas Tech in the game of football. I apologize to my team and coaches. I'm not that kind of player, and we'll learn from this." All right. Look at that ratio, guys. Like, he's got 1.1 thousand replies and only 947 likes. Now, for those of you, the olds, what that ratio means is basically people really hate that tweet and they reply to it more than they actually like it. But the amount of, like, I would be pissed off if I was a Razorback fan and that happened to one of my players. I would be pissed off. Like, I would be. And I would want to defend my player 100%. But I'd like to think that I would not take it to a level of saying that that particular player literally needs to have his entire life and potential career ruined and killed because of that act. It's just absurd. And so I know it's this day and age and that's social media and everything, but for crying out loud, there is a little bit of gray area in some of this stuff where you can say it's bad while also acknowledging that it doesn't need to be the end of the world. But for whatever reason, man, it blew up. That people were just irate and insane about this stuff.
Well, and yeah, like half the NFL. I mean,
yes,
it's insane.
Like, I just didn't understand why it got to that level. And then, the ones that got me were the people that were just frantically, these Texas Tech fans, tweeting at Sam Pittman, tweeting at Hunter Yurachek. I had people on my TikTok in the comments from a video I posted a month ago being like 55 needs to be removed from the team. I'm like, what? Do y'all have jobs? Like, do you have not everything better to do? Like, you're that upset by this that you were like putting together a coalition of people to try to take down this guy. I just did not understand the outrage to that level. Be pissed off. I get it. But man, that just took a whole nother level of insanity. And hopefully this is something that's just over with after today and everyone can just move on from it. Because, man, that was just a weird, crazy thing over the weekend.
Yeah, the reaction definitely felt extreme to me. And, also let's point out the kid that got his ankle stepped on, he's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sure that pissed him off. And that's why he, wound up putting the video out there and everything like that. But he's okay. I'm sure it hurt like hell in the moment, and it could have been a lot worse. It absolutely could have. But he avoided major injury there. That doesn't mean it's okay that Carmona did it. But again, like we were talking about with the season a while ago, I mean, context does matter, in these situations. So yeah, I don't know why it has to be this big of a thing. And I guess it's because people are so passionate on either side of it, but it's like, don't cuff the kid for, making a stupid move there in a game. And then on the other side, like, we don't have to go pull up every, low tackle that's ever been made in the history of football and start pointing to that to justify those actions. Like, none of those things really have to happen. They're going to, but it's silly.
Well, let me bring this up real quick. Is it okay? Because to your point, I meant to bring that up too, what you said, Curse, but it's true. To me, it was about a pendulum swinging. I think like Razorback fans that were coming out and defending Carmona in a way, it was because the pendulum swung so too much to the extreme that they felt like, well, hold on a second. We got to bring this back to reality. We got to bring this back in. So we're going to go and try to overcorrect it. It's like the political landscape too. It's like people just go all the way over there, but there is nothing that will piss me off more. And I don't care what side of the argument you're on. This whataboutism crap is the worst type of arguments that could ever be made when it's like, well, this guy just, what about this play 2 weeks ago? He did this. Where's the outrage then? Just call it out as it happens and be like that. But it just, again, the defense mechanisms that people go into whenever one of their people or one of their players or whatever happens, it's weird just how, like, you're like, do you listen to yourself? Do you hear what yourself is saying? It gets out of hand really quickly.
No, that's a great point, John. I agree. And I mean, that's why I firmly believe, like, most of the people that are like pushing weird comments on this don't really believe what they're saying. Like, I saw a lot of people who were citing when Taylor Green got injured against Tennessee, which one, by the way, that was a play that happened like during a play, which was a hit. It was a low hit. It was an illegal hit. It was a dirty hit, and it was flagged. And like, I don't understand like what the how is that supposed to matter in this situation either? Where it's like, oh, well, we didn't have that reaction. Like, and we didn't come on the show saying that Tennessee player should get his scholarship revoked. Like, that's not a thing that we did. I also would say that we talked about the whataboutism and how the reaction sometimes is just people, the pendulum swings a little bit. That's where the national people talking out about it, I think they saw how riled up people got and realized, hey, I can get a quick reaction. Emmanuel Acho comes to mind. He's like one of the most shameful tap dancers we have in society today. When he sees people riled up, he's like, oh, let me throw some something on this and get this fire really going. I also wanted to bring up this comment here from Jeff, our guy who's a legend on the chat. He says, I don't like the look of it, but it's football. Yeah. Nobody had issues when Dan Skipper used to do crazy things like this in games for Arkansas back in the day. Dan Skipper's one of the most loved hogs ever, and he might be the most dirty player Arkansas ever had at the university. That dude would literally just punch people mid-play. He would literally, grab face masks, putting his fingers in people's eyes. Drew Morgan spit in a dude's face at one point. Like, Arkansas's had, this is not without precedent. Arkansas's had some guys who kind of live on the edge. When you have a football team full of 100 guys, you're going to have your nice guys. You're going to have your mean guys. You're going to have your guys who do it by the book. You're going to have some guys that like to throw an elbow or two. Like, it's kind of normal. And so I'm not trying to say that it's not bad. I'm not trying to even desensitize it. But to act like this is like this crazy, unprecedented thing that is coming out of nowhere, even in Arkansas sports, like Arkansas's always kind of had guys who, make dirty plays here and there. Are they bad? Yes, and we can talk about it. But it reminds me a little bit of when like a coach's pregame speech gets leaked and people start clutching their pearls over the curse words being used. And it's like, not saying it's good, but like this is very much just par for the course. Like this is what happens in locker rooms. This is how people talk. It's one of those things where sometimes you shine a light on something and a light doesn't need to be shown on it.
Yeah. I'd even throw in another baseball. I guess a lot of baseball terms and feelings for me apparently today, but it's like when a pitcher wants to beam a dude with a 90-mile-an-hour fastball to the ribs. It's like, yeah, if you do that out in public, it's probably assault, and it's not something that's good and it doesn't need to happen, but it happens. But is anybody being like, oh, he needs to be never allowed to play again? It's like, it's sports, folks. It's not justified, but it's sports. Stuff like this happens. It's competitive, it's passionate, and that's the way it is. So, but yeah, moving on from that drama and controversy, let's go to another great drama and controversy. This is what the weekend held. Thought it was positive vibes only, but apparently not. There was some former players, specifically one notable former player for the Razorback football team of Dwight McGlothern. You remember Nudie, the cornerback for Arkansas and everything. But he was talking about how he loves the Razorbacks and everything. And people were like, well, what are you talking about, man? What's going on here? Well, he had a few tweets, but I'll put up this one. It was really the biggest one. Dwight McGlothern was talking about when he was benched back in the 2023 season. He was talking about, I agree, talking about Sam Pittman. He benched me, quote, after I didn't play Bama game because I had a concussion, and told him days before the game and didn't tell my trainers, and he had me warm up, and I told him I couldn't go. And after that, he tried to make it seem like I got my spot took. He did not speak to me anymore. So I know we were texting back and forth, guys, but there was always that thing that we talked about. It was like, it's kind of weird that he got benched or whatever. Two sides to every story, all this stuff. But what'd you make of the tweets there by Nudie, Dwight McGlothern, about Sam Pittman?
There are two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. We all know that. We all know that Sam Pittman's never going to speak on this, so we won't know the other side of the story. Andrew, I remember you in particular being really vocal about this when it was all going down last year, of like, let's not pretend here that Dwight McGlothern has just lost his spot. That's not a thing on the roster that they had. Here's what I will say, though. Just kind of understanding how this process works. You don't self-diagnose a concussion without your medical staff knowing. Like if you report symptoms, like if you go tell the coach, like, hey, I've got a headache or I'm dizzy or whatever, then it's on him to tell the medical staff, and then you get evaluated, and then you get diagnosed with a concussion, and at which point you're just out, period. Like there's no real wiggle room there. So something very clearly got lost in translation there. I'm not saying he didn't have a concussion. I have no idea. But that representation of the facts there seems there's a lot lost in translation. That's just not how it works. So that is something that struck me.
I'm glad that you touched on that, because I was going to say, like, I don't feel like I'm qualified to speak on that. Like on the he said, she said of the medical staff stuff, who knows? I mean, we talked about this a little bit with Jalen Braxton, where it's like, when you have a story like this, it's really tough to like declare a winner here and be like, oh, this guy's in the right or this guy's in the wrong. So I'm glad that you know, who has a lot of training and athletic training background, that I appreciate that insight. And I would also add that, like you said, I was on the side of Dwight McGlothern last year when all this, not the concussion stuff, but when we just benched him due to performance. And yeah, something, you know, we just felt like this other guy, Jaheim Singletary, we just thought he was a starter. I could tell something was weird, and I talked about it. And frankly, I got a lot of shit for it, if I'm being honest with you. Hog fans really didn't like it. But I remember thinking it was weird, and I took Nudy's side. And Nudy's one of my favorite Hogs of the last decade. Like, I really appreciated him as a player, loved his personality and all that. I never like it when people air out this dirty laundry on Twitter. Nobody has ever successfully, like, stated their case and like tried to make an argument about a personal story on Twitter. I've never thought that was a good thing to do. I just don't think that's the way to go about it. So I don't love that from Nudy. Did Sam, now clearly him and Sam had some type of just misunderstanding. Like, they did not see eye to eye, whether it was the concussion, whether it was in practice, whether it was games, whether it was whatever. Those two guys, it's not a secret, they didn't like each other and they butted heads. And it clearly showed up in Nudy's senior year when he was one of the best corners in the league or in the country, not even starting. And so look, I think it would be unwise for any of us to really try and like dive in and like say who was right or who was wrong. I think both of those guys just had an issue, and it affected the team last year, and it affected Nudy. I'm sure feels like, hey, Sam told these scouts that I sucked, and that's why I didn't get drafted, even though I was one of the best defenders in the country. And he's playing in the NFL, so it's going to be okay for him. But I just never like it when you go to Twitter to try and like, especially because by the way, he was replying to a tweet about Desmond James and how fast he ran. And then people were like, oh, I wonder why Desmond James wasn't playing or whatever, which we touched on the post game. A little bit of a non-story. Desmond James was like nowhere on the depth chart, and it wasn't because he was being buried and hidden or whatever. It was just, he just wasn't even in contention to play. He clearly has gotten better.
At one point.
Right. Yeah. It's like, he's clearly, gotten better, made some strides, and good for him. But like, we don't have to turn this into something it's not. And so Nudy trying to take his situation, add it to the Desmond James thing, and try and like fan the flames of this thing about Pittman. I'm not into that. I'm really not into that. And that comes from someone who took Nudy's side on this case a year ago.
Yeah, I've always felt like if there are issues, there are problems or something like that, like this in particular, of course, it's easy to say, like, hey, you should just handle it man to man and everything. But I think timing is always everything. And my reckless assumption in all this is a reckless assumption, is it's almost like Nudy almost was pissed about, because he responded about the Carmona thing. He saw that and he said, this is bad character, man, is what he said. And I think he got mad about that. And I think he was mad about possibly, or maybe had a reaction to how many people were talking about Sam Pittman, maybe more in a positive thing because they just won a game. And then, and it just kind of accumulated there. And he decided to come out and say how he felt about it. He's got that right, what's in his right, and say his opinion and everything. But I just don't understand really what the point, I guess, of it is. Like, what are you trying to accomplish? Is it just because you really don't like Sam Pittman and you want to bring him down? It's like, okay, if that's what you want to do, that's fine. Just say it. But to just casually do it, like you said, on a random Desmond James tweet, 2 days after a Liberty Bowl or a day after a Liberty Bowl, it's kind of like, why? Like, it was so random and coming out. But then it took to another level, guys. And this is another former player. A lot of you may not remember him, but it was a very controversial player, Cade Renfro, former walk-on quarterback at Arkansas. There was a lot of things that were going around, allegations and whatnot on social media, but he even responded on social media to Dwight McGlothern. And he says, quote, "It's a damn shame, too, because one man can solely influence how you're perceived, act like your friend to your face, and lie to keep you down behind your back. Funny because I got the text, too. I think most ex-players have stayed silent about Sam because his drama is not worth the time. He'll deny it. Fayetteville was my home for 3 years. I'm a graduate of the University of Arkansas. So I love the city, people, and fans. However, I will never support the Razorbacks with him as head coach." So you got, again, like, I want you guys' thoughts on it. But my only thought on this, especially with both of them, is like, I understand how people have different experiences. I mean, for crying out loud, Curtis, I know you've been a coach, and I know we've talked to coaches, but in football, especially when you have 100 and some odd players every single year, odds are that every single one of those players are going to like you, love you, respect you, and think you are the greatest thing since sliced bread is next to none. It's not. There are guys that played for Dave Van Horn that do not like Dave Van Horn. I mean, it's just how it happens. So take that into context. But it's still just one of those things where I'm like, I don't understand the whole purpose behind all of it. I really don't. That's my thought on it.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you on that. I'm not gonna sit here and take like a definitive stance on this, and that's not dodging it, but it's just I just don't think it's a smart thing to do because there's so much context and so much that we just don't know. I think it would be foolish. I think a few things can be true. One, none of this is a particularly good look for Sam Pittman. No matter what, no matter how much truth there is to any of this, it's not a good look. I mean, you think about just kind of like the piling up of things that's going on, and it has been going on. Like I remember who was it that got arrested down there? Was it Slusher a couple years ago?
Yeah.
You had that. You had the Joe Adams, Jarius Wright thing, and then you had the Ty Washington, Barquise Gums deal, and then now you got all this. Like it's kind of just like one thing after another. And so, I think you think about that and you're like, damn, like, is this dude really who we think he is? And it's like, I would understand how people could feel that way. I also know that there's probably a mixture here of truths and people talking about how they really feel versus sour grapes and, some embellishment. And that's just how it works in all of these situations. So I would encourage people to try to be measured. I know we're trying to be measured in the way that we're discussing this stuff, but to me, I think it's not a good look, not what you want after having a little bit of a momentum thing, go in your direction after the Liberty Bowl. But boy, I really wouldn't jump to definitive conclusions, especially when we've only got one side of the story, and that's probably all we're really ever going to have. It's a delicate situation. That's why a lot of people don't talk about it.
100%. It's definitely not a good look. Anytime former players, whether they're justified or not, anytime former players are speaking out and saying, hey, I had this negative experience with the head coach and he's not who he says he is and blah, blah, blah. That's never good. And there's no way around that. And so I want to get that out of the way first. I don't want it to sound like I'm like defending Sam Pittman at all costs. And I'm like, hey, nobody should ever talk bad about Sam Pittman. That's an interesting conversation to have of the whole, is he really the nice, happy-go-lucky guy? Because some of these players don't like him and all that. And that's a fair conversation and one that we can have. I would just, again, like you're saying, Curtis, like I don't really love seeing tweets from former players and jumping to like a conclusion like that. Especially, look, the Desmond James situation is its own separate thing. The Nudie McGlothern situation is its own separate thing. Very, very different situations. And then when you throw in a walk-on quarterback who was, we're not going to touch on the allegations, but had some very serious allegations around there that it was a huge controversy. That's a whole separate conversation we can have. Trying to tie these three things together and then come away from it and be like, this is my reasoning for why Sam Pittman sucks. I would caution against that. I would very much. Is it weird? Is it concerning? Is it a bad look? 1,000%. And I'm not even a guy who we literally, the three of us basically came out on the show weeks ago and we're like, they should have fired Sam Pittman. That's how we felt. We're not like the biggest Sam Pittman defenders of all time. I just think there's ways to have this conversation and ways to speak about whether or not he's the right head coach or whether or not he's even a good guy or any of that. I just don't love the whole let's go on Twitter and stir up a bunch of drama. Again, it comes back to my point of when people see fans riled up, they want to throw in their 2 cents in and fan the flames a little bit. They like to do that. And I think both of those players kind of knew what they were going to do. They knew what kind of reaction it was going to get. And, it is what it is. They're entitled to do that. I'm sure they feel that they really do feel that way. I don't like airing out the dirty laundry on Twitter. I don't like just the whole mess that it has become. And so it really was kind of, it didn't bother me too much, but I didn't like seeing all this stuff going down last night.
And I'll throw in another reckless assumption because apparently I'm doing that today, which I'm sure is not dangerous at all. But here's just my thought process of how I'm trying to go into the psychology of it all. Sam Pittman, let's just assume that what these players just for fun say what they're saying is true, and that's what happened or whatever. Here's the thing: what we know about Sam Pittman. Sam Pittman, rightfully, wrongfully, however you want to look at it, is unconditionally loyal to you if you're loyal to him. That is the biggest driver of his. Is that if you go all in on him, if you believe in him, if you're part of what he's wanting to do, he loves you. He'll do anything for you. That's why, like in this whole bowl game, the whole thing was about All we have is all we need. That's the thing. That is how he's built. And that's how he's been as an offensive line coach for a long time. And say why he recruited so well is because it was a very strong, loyal bond. But I would go as far to say that maybe in these particular situations or any other situations that people have had problems with Sam Pittman may have come when Sam Pittman felt like those players, they don't take me seriously. They don't believe in what I'm doing. They don't believe in what we're doing. Maybe they did something or said something. Maybe they didn't want to play, whatever it is. And once that happens, he shuts you out. You're done. And I know that's kind of at least how I gathered. You brought up the Varkey's Gums situation in them, which, I almost forgot about. But what was the whole thing about that? He asked him to go in the game, and he didn't go into the game. They told him to get in the game. He didn't go in. So what does that do for someone like Sam Pittman? He ain't loyal. He's not loyal to me. Doesn't care about. So I ain't got nothing for him. So I think every coach in their own minds have certain things like little bugaboos that just kill them and shut them down, and they don't want any part of things. I would go on again, reckless assumption that maybe there was something like that where certain players, whether they're right or wrong, but I think Sam Pittman, that's one of the things that will really get him going and saying, hey, I don't really have much for you because you're saying things or you're doing things. I don't feel like you're loyal to me. So why should I be loyal to you? That's my reckless assumption. So, but yeah, man, what a weekend. What a weekend on Twitter and social media. It's so much fun to discuss all the stupid controversy